Alrighty. I want to share some more of these little things that happened, incidents that happened along. Uh, Living on the res, our home was broken into twice. The first time we were in Tennessee in a World Mission Conference, and Lawrence uh, was staying. I guess Jim Taft was staying with him. But anyway, our home got broke into, and uh, not so much stolen, but vandalism. They took spray paint, spray painted the inside of our refrigerator. Um, Lawrence had um, a model airplane that he was building, and this is one of the old stick uh, that were stick and balsa wood and covered with paper, and this thing had a 54-inch wingspan, a beautiful, beautiful thing, and the kids just made toothpicks out of it, just ruined it, and uh, and a lot of it was antagonism because we were thought to be really wealthy, and and wasn't, but we put our money to good use, and so. But anyway, when we got back home, we went through the process of letting the police do something, and of course they would do nothing or did nothing. And Lawrence at that time was, I don't know, 12, 13 years old, somewhere in that vicinity. And he got I guess there was one thing that was stolen that to me was valuable. They stole a full feathered eagle feather war bonnet that I had made, and so that brought the FBI in to it because of the value of it, and they did an investigation, and Lawrence was they had gotten into the paint. The kids had gotten into the paint, and there was fingerprints and shoe prints, and so Lawrence got the idea that some of the kids in the neighborhood were in and out of our house all the time because of our kids. And Lawrence said, when they broke into our house, he said, I found a neat thing. He said, look here. He said, you can put a little bit of paint on your finger and it shows up on. And he got the kids to putting their fingerprints on this and getting their shoe prints of what their shoes looked like. He'd put down some dust or something and get a copy. But anyway, we were able to turn this over to the FBI, and they located the kids across the street, and they. I was a little hesitant to mention my headdress because non-Indians are not supposed to have eagle feathers, and I had 32 of them in this headdress, and but I mentioned it, and the fella that was investigating for the FBI had been there during Wounded Knee, and we knew each other, and he told me, he said, "Nah," he said, "Harold," he said, "this is as much your culture as it is the Indian culture where you're working." He said, "Not a problem at all." We were kind coming back from Sharp's Corner one day and met him, and he honked and blinked his lights at us and stopped us, and he said, "I want you to see what I got." And there was my headdress. He said, "Now I'm going to have to go ahead and take it in as evidence," but he said, we've got it back, and you'll get it back." And I have it. But anyway, that was one of those break-ins. And then the next one that we got, well, there's kind of a neat thing about that. Lawrence's airplane got, and this model airplane would fly, had a motor and everything in it. And Lawrence was working at school with some kind of a scientific class or something. But anyway, they were building an airplane, and but it was not as elaborate as the one he had been working on. And when it came down close to the time we were broke into, it was at the end of the school, and the school teacher told him, he said, "Lawrence, why don't you just take this airplane home?" And Lawrence was really broke up over getting his plane destroyed, of course, and Delo told him, he said, "Lawrence, don't understand why, but it says God could make it possible for you to get an airplane. That's not." And so he came home with this airplane that the teacher had given him, and so he had gotten it. Then we got in. We had one other break-in, and this one was they went through and they pretty well wiped out a lot of our stuff, a lot of our beadwork. I'd been given blankets and quilts and stuff like this from foster grandparents and from funerals and this type of thing. And my father had made a hunting, an axe that I used in hunting, but it was a handmade axe head that my father had made, and got this stolen, and we lost a lot of valuable stuff that we never got back. But for living on the res for 23 years and only being broken into twice is kind of an extraordinary thing. And pardon me. And it was along about somewhere in this time that my folks was down visiting, and or up visiting, and it was on a Sunday morning, and I went by this home to pick up children, and when nobody answered the door, I opened the door and walked into the living room, and there was a little baby crying, and she was messy, and there was nobody in the house. Mother and Dad were both gone. Kids were gone. The two kids I normally picked up. So I took the baby home and called the police and told them that I had the baby, but that it had been deserted, and that we had cleaned it up and we had it at our house. And later, a part of the welfare came and picked the child up, but my folks were just scared to death because they said, "You stole that baby." And there were some people brought this up, and I said, "Hey," I said, "call it whatever you want to," but I said they did not take care of that little baby. And so we I stole the baby, but afterwards that couple, the wife especially, I've seen her, I saw her I don't know, 5, 6 years ago. She's still a friend, and they still realize what I did was for good, and it worked out. We had another experience that we had a group of GAs that came from Casper, Wyoming, the Baptist church there. They wanted to visit a mission field, so they came to visit, and they had an idea in their mind that they would stay in a hotel there in Pine Ridge, and they came by the house, and I think there was, I don't know, 6, 7 girls, and I said, I don't think you want to stay in that motel or hotel, because we stayed in it when we first moved here, and there are no locks on the doors. You cannot lock them. And the reason they give you is because we had somebody go in and kill themselves, and we couldn't get in. We had to break the door down. So I said the only way we got by with it was I took a table knife and stuck it in the door on the inside. And but I said I sure wouldn't. So they bedded down in our living room, and we went out to a park, called it Moccasin Park, for a picnic, winter roast, and Damien, you have never seen as many ticks in your life as there was out there at that picnic ground. There was concrete picnic tables and seats, and we got out there and began to get a fire built and get stuff started. And a little girl saw a tick crawling across the ground toward her. And she screamed, and of course, panic. And we got to looking, and there was ticks crawling on the ground, all different directions, coming toward these girls, these kids, people, us. And the first thing that happened, these girls, including our daughter, were up on top of the picnic table. But there was, I would say there was 5 or 6 ticks per square foot crawling right toward them. Never saw so many ticks in all of my life. Needless to say, end of picnic quick. Back to our house, and but the other thing that you learn is head lice, and this is not just an Indian problem. Lots of times we come down and make it a racial thing and whatever, but it's definitely not. But we've had our struggle with Barbara would go to school and come home with head lice, and one of the most and about the only thing, there is a special soap that you can use to wash your head in it, and it makes it extremely greasy. And it's quite a process. And then the combing of your hair, there's a real fine comb. And so Barbara has been through that numbers of times, and Deloris has been through it as well. And one time we had Deloris knew that she had gotten into head lice, and so she had just washed her head and got it all combed out, and we went over to Sharp's Corner, and there was a little girl that such a lovable little girl, and she crawled up in Deloris's lap and leaned back her head back against her and said, "Miss Deloris, I love you so much." And Deloris said, I could see the headlights coming out of her hair onto me and up into my own hair. And she said, I didn't say anything. And she said, "Sweetheart, I love you too." And she said, I knew it was home and get my shampoo and go again. But this was one of the things that is a part of being a missionary and sharing. Okay. In '88, we had a young man, Philip Lawrence, who had been a summer missionary from Nashville, Tennessee, that had come to help us several years, felt the Lord's call to preach and had come out to Sharp's Corner and was pastoring at Sharp's Corner. And then when Phil left, we were without anybody. And Earl Headland, the Mennonite missionary, we were looking for somebody and couldn't get anyone. And he told us that there was a couple. The girl had been the wife had been a missionary with them for a while, and she had married a fellow named Ken Martin. And I knew Ken and was not real satisfied with the fact, but it worked out. We went ahead and called him as a pastor out at Sharp's Corner, and we had just finished the parsonage out there. It was a log parsonage, and so Ken went out there, and about that same time we started a Bible study at Gordon, Nebraska. That's about 50 miles away. And it never did, we had a family, but it never did really take out and grow like we'd like for it to. But it did. We were out there for almost a year with it. That year was the beginning of a really successful ministry through Vacation Bible Schools. From '88 through '93, we had some of the largest Vacation Bible Schools on the reservation. We averaged 829 children in one year, 704 another year, 822 another year. At Pine Ridge, we had 408 kids in Vacation Bible School. Had to have two Vacation Bible Schools, one for the north part of town, one for the south part of town, because couldn't handle them all at one time. The reason we made Vacation Bible Schools so important was that I knew there was no possible way that we were going to be able to start churches all across, or missions all the way across the res. But at least through a Vacation Bible School, we could get a group of people from Tennessee, Kentucky, down in that area, who could come up and and do the work, and they could stay in our church, and we could at least share the gospel with a lot of children in a very short time. And many of these groups, as I've already previously said, many of these groups, their teachers and people wrote back and kept correspondence with these kids. And we were doing vacation Bible schools at Ogallala, at Sharp's Corner, at Pine Ridge, at Wounded Knee, at Manderson, at Allen, and at Kyle. And there was during one of the things that made this so effective in this 3 or 4 year period or 5 year period was the fact that there were no summer schools. Now there are summer schools, and you can't get the kids out. Well, we had no summer schools, so this helped us in this during this time. Another thing was the openness of the people. We had been there long enough that they knew who we were. They knew who Southern Baptists were. They knew who Harold Heiney was, and they trusted us. And there was a very openness among the people during that time. Now that openness was not there. We figure that it took us at least 10 years to gain the confidence of the people on the res, because missionaries have come and gone, and teachers have come and gone, and that they're used to this. But we had stayed, and we feel like that was a part of this openness. There's been, since that time, there's been a large movement of back to the traditional ways, and back to the language and all of these things, which has created problems. Now, we used to use buses and vans and things that I've had 35 kids in my 15-passenger van. Now, the vans are stopped and kids counted, and seat belts required, and all kinds of requirements and all the lighting and everything else must work. So the missionaries that are working now, it's so much harder than it was back then. But during that time of 88 to 93, we saw just a phenomenal growth in reaching out, and right during this period of time, there was just such an openness. Ken Martin stayed out at Sharp's Corner for a year and resigned out there. He later confessed to me. He said, the only reason that I took the church, it was a way for me to get back to the reservation from Omaha, Nebraska. And that's about all the good he accomplished. It was along this time that we, I guess after Ken resigned, Marge and Bill Ellsworth came as pastors at Sharp's Corner. They came out of St. Louis, Missouri area. And boy, they did such a magnificent work. That couple had a heart for the people, and I got it. There's a reason for it. They were the youth leaders for the Cahokia, Illinois church, the Maplewood Park Baptist Church, that brought out mission groups to do vacation Bible schools. They saw and knew the people. And so God moved in their hearts to call them after they left Maplewood Park to come and serve. And they were with us a couple of years out at Sharp's Corner. And Marge is a concert pianist. I mean, she is good. And her testimony is such a sweet testimony of how God allowed her to become the pianist that she was. But all of the big convention meetings and everything in the state of Illinois, she was their pianist. And for the Lord to see fit to put Bill and Marge out at Sharp's Corner, such a tremendous witness, and just got again. Here's Vacation Bible Schools. They came as a result of Vacation Bible Schools. We had well over 50 people who have ended up in full-time Christian service one place or another who have ties to Vacation Bible Schools at Pine Ridge. And so it was just an astronomical thing. Along in '89, we also began a Bible study at Rushville, Nebraska, and that was pretty successful. In '90, we had 9 young adults from O'Fallon, Missouri, came up and did a door-to-door evangelism in Pine Ridge. This is the first time we had attempted anything like this. And I spent a lot of time with the director of this group. We had 14 professions of faith out of these visits, but they did a door-to-door and hit every door in Pine Ridge, and I encouraged them to to not put a lot of pressure, because you can get a profession of faith so easy. They'll get rid of you. And we worked on this, and they had a group that did a good job, and I feel like that of those 14 professions of faith, I think there was some that really truly come to know the Lord. It was along about this same time in '89 that Cordell Wilson was saved. Cordell Wilson was a janitor up at the hospital. His wife, Maribel, was a Mennonite, a Christian, and a real strong Mennonite. And Cordell was an alcoholic. He drank almost all the time, but he had been drunk on his birthday since he was 5 years old. And he would, because he lived about a block from our house, if he needed a screw or a bolt or whatever, he would come up to my place, because I had a pretty ready supply of that stuff. junk that I would junk out and everything. And Cordell would tell me, he said, "Preacher," he said, "you're going to have to clean this place up and get rid of about half this junk in here." And I said, "Cordell, if I get rid of my junk, you don't have a hardware store." And, but he tried to, came by one night drinking and wanted me to go with him. And I refused him. I had an experience with an Oklahoma Indian, a Kickapoo, and I was not going to do that trick again. But I began to, through the friendship, I had opportunity to lead Cordell to know the Lord as his personal Savior. He would come to our, since he was a janitor, our church was spotless. We had tile throughout the entire building, and he would bring his buffer, and boy, it just sparkled. And they had two sons. He had two sons and a daughter, and those boys, he used them, and they were at our RE camps and everything else. And when Cordell became a Christian, it pretty well took care of his drinking. He didn't drink hardly at all, but he'd always be drunk on his birthday. We tried everything we could possibly do. We'd have a birthday party and bake him a cake and do all this kind of stuff. But Maribel, when Cordell was saved and was baptized, Maribel began to come to our church, and Maribel was faced with diabetes, just like, and many times Maribel has said, it's so hard to be a Christian and so hard to be sick. Said, even my own mother and my own sisters will cook up a bunch of beans and cornbread and stuff, that diabetics should not eat. And she said, no matter how much I try not to eat this, they'll say, what's the matter? Are you too good for us? Even for your own mother? And she struggled with this so much. And eventually they were doing the same thing of cutting off fingers and cutting off feet or parts. And she was in Minneapolis one time, and I drove down to Minneapolis and drove in to see her and Cordell, and spent a couple of days with them. Eventually, she passed away, and Cordell struggled with her death. Cordell could not read. One time his mother was in California, and our church voted to send him down to fly him down there to where he could be with his mother. And he told me, he said, Harold, I can't go. And I said, well, why? And he said, I can't read. And he said, I can't read the signs. I can't read the in the airport, I can't read the flight numbers. And and it was really a problem with Cordell, because even Maribel would try to help him, and he said, what's the matter? Ain't I good enough the way I am? And but Cordell was such a dear friend, and I saw him grow, and I know there's question when he died pretty much an alcoholic. The pastors that they had would not spend time with him, and that's the only way you keep him from being drunk. And there's some that doubt that he was ever saved, but there's not a question in my mind that he did not know the Lord as his personal Savior. In 90, Ernest was with us again. Ernest Best was with us again as an evangelist, and we had bought the ranch here by this time, and I shared that it was Steve's dream, and how that there was no way we could buy it. And as it worked out, Deloris's mother had a stroke, and her sister was in charge of her money, and so I called Alice and I said, does Grandma have any monies? She had a ranch, a farm down in Oklahoma. I said, does she have any monies that might be available? This was long in November, and a year after Steve had talked about this, and he had told me before he went to Idaho, he said, you're going to have to make up your mind, because he said in November it's going to sell. So I called Alice, and she said, well, yeah. She said, Mom had 2 CDs for $18,000 apiece. One of them is made out to Deloris, and one of them is mine. And she said they come out the 1st of November. And she said, how much do they want for that ranch? And I said, $36,500. And Alice said, I'll tell you what. She said, Deloris can have her $18,000, and I'll loan you my $18,000 at 6% interest, which back then was good interest. And she said, you guys can go ahead and buy the ranch. So that's what we did. And so that happened in 88, and or 89, I guess it was. And then in 90, Deloris and I was over here at the ranch. What we got to doing was that we would take a day a week off, a day and a night, and come over and work on the ranch, work on the place here, on the house especially, and get away from the rails a little bit. And so we were over here one day and getting ready to go back, and I had driven somewhere and come back in, and I wanted to check the water, and I popped the radiator cap, and it blew up on me. And I was burnt across my neck and the left side of my chest. It was second, third degree burns as it developed. And I had on a T-shirt. It was summertime, and I had on a T-shirt. I jerked off the T-shirt. I came in, and I turned on the shower on cold water, and I stood under that shower for 30 minutes, letting that cold water, because I knew that a burn needs to cool down. not so much anymore the butter situation, the grease thing, but get water to it. And so I did. And then we ran into Hot Springs, and they gave me some emergency treatment, and then I went on to Shadron, where we doctored, and you could see that heel at almost an inch a day. They used Silverdine ointment and a full body tube gauze thing over, and but I hardly have any scar of that. It's there, but not a lot of damage done. And then Dennis Apple was saved at Pine Ridge and baptized in the lake out at East Dam, east of Pine Ridge, where we baptized a lot of people. And Bill Tiger and Bill and Marge Ellsworth led our singing. Bill was an Oklahoma Indian, but by this time he was beginning to be the pastor up in North Dakota, and on the res up there. And Bill had been a friend for a lot of years. And then we had the group come back from O'Fallon again in '91 and did the door-to-door. They visited 169 homes and did a seminar on soul winning, which helped us in our ministry. Leroy Clifford was an individual that we had opportunity to touch his life. He was a solid Catholic, and the Cliffords are a pretty well-known name on Pine Ridge. And when he was saved, he and began to come to our church. He was still tied into his Catholic background and into his tribal background. He still used the pipe, the peace pipe, for a prayer aid, I guess you would say. And he was married to a Navajo girl who was a Southern Baptist. And so when he would come to church, he'd always have questions. And why is this wrong, or why don't we do this like the Catholic Church does it, or whatever? And I would just keep going back to the Word and sharing him with the Word and letting him make decisions. It's like this pipe thing. He was very open. He said, I pray with my pipe. Well, there came a time when we did that Bible study down in Rushville. It was in his home, and one night after we got done, he said, Harold, he said, I don't think I'm going to need this anymore. And he brought me his pipe and gave it to me. It used to be up there. It's not there now. And he came back this last year and asked if I would allow him to take that pipe, because he wanted to use it in his witness. And he is witnessing to tribal leadership and to medicine men all over the world. And what he's planning to do and what he does is, this is what I used to be with this pipe. but now this is where I am with the Bible. And shares this. And right along with this, he used to go to sweats. And sweat is where there's a small tent where you can just kind of climb into, and you've got a fire going, and you are hot rocks, and you pour water on them, and they steam, and it's a cleansing, but a praying time. And he said, I still go to sweats. And I said, well, if the Lord doesn't convict you, you know, and he said, well, I pray to Jesus. And he came to church one Sunday morning, and I never saw Leroy so angry in all of my life. He said, I want you to know I will never go to another sweat. And I said, well, what in the world happened? And he said, I was in the sweat last night praying. And he said, I heard some of my friends. And he said, I was praying to Jesus. And he said, I heard some of my so-called friends outside making fun of me and of my Jesus. And he said, I'll never go back again. And we had a Christmas program every year up at the Cohen home, the retirement home outside of Pine Ridge, and Leroy shared at our Christmas program up there about his Christmas, and he said, you know, he said, this is the best Christmas that I have ever had since I was a little boy, and shared this with the elderly that were there, and it was just a neat time. And then Mary Bell passed away in 92, and it was this year that the foster grandparents honored me with 20 years on the advisory board. And it was also one, Deloris had hepatitis that was gotten from the res, and dealing there. This was in 92, and we had 39 men and women from Illinois come to help us at Pine Ridge, at Sharp's Corner, and here at the ranch in building. They put new carpet throughout the house in Pine Ridge, and you'll probably be familiar with the leader of this group. His name was John Whitman. This was, I had met John prior to this when Marge and Bill were here as pastors. They took a week off during a month off during the summer for vacation to go back home, take care of some business and stuff. And Mary Ruth and John Whitman came out to supply for them. And John and I met each other, and the Lord worked that special work in our heart. And so he came out with a group. We were talking about maybe 24, and he called me one day and he said, Harold, he said, what can we do with 39? And so there was work at Pine Ridge and at Sharp's Corner that we talked about. And John said, well, why can't we do something out at the ranch? And I said, well, John, I said, that's not mission work. And he said, oh, now wait a minute. He said, we got churches and we got men that go and help pastors build their summer homes out on lakes and stuff. He said, working on your ranch is a part of your mission work. And so they came out and they put the roof on this. The porch was here, but there wasn't a roof on it. And they added this screened-in porch across the whole end of our building here, of our house. And so they came out and helped us. And of course, John was eventually moved out and built their home here, and we're here. And it was also in '92 that I was inducted into the International League of Royal Ambassador Leaders in June the 10th of '92, and this is a worldwide Royal Ambassador thing, and John Whitman was partially responsible for my induction into this. We had a man who worked at Brotherhood from Oklahoma that was working here in the Dakotas with our convention, and he was involved in this as well. And Bob Banks, who was a Royal Ambassador leader in Oklahoma, who became pretty active in Memphis with the Brotherhood Department. It was a result of these three individuals plus my work that I was inducted into the International League of Royal Ambassador Leaders, and got a couple plaques and things that share this. Mike Marable became a pastor out at Sharp's Corner for a couple of years, also in '92, and it was in '92 that the foster grandparents had an honoring service for me, and I was made a Sioux Warrior and given an Indian name, and I'm going to spell the spelling of these because I cannot say them. It's WISASA, WOWAPI, GLUHA, OYATE, EGNA, MANA. Now, this was the name that they gave me, translated in English, means a man with a book who walks among us. And I was given an eagle feather, tied not in my hair, they tried to, and but tied onto my glasses. And one of the things that they said, now they said this is not an honorary, you are not an honorary warrior. You are designated as a Sioux Warrior. The Red Cloud that shared this said that we've had people out of Washington come and things like this, and they're given headdresses and feathers and this type of thing, and they're made honorary members of the tribe or whatever. But he said, we want you to be aware that this designation, that you are a Sioux Warrior from this time forth. And this was, they had a feast and an honoring, and it was a very, very special time. It was during, took 8 people back to Falls Creek again this year, and also Leroy Clifford left and went back to Washington, D.C., and was in the Bureau of Indian Affairs there. It was in 93 that Bill Combs and Kathy joined our church. Now, they came to Pine Ridge with a group out of Arizona. Now, they're white, but they came as missionaries to the Indian, and the Lord began to work with them and with us, and they began to do our kids club. They started a kids club. They had 25, 33 kids all the time in it, and they joined our church and became a very active part of it. The Lord began to indicate to us and to them that because of my Parkinson's, it was going to come a time for me to retire. And so on October the 31st, 1993, I resigned from the Lakota Baptist Church, and the church called Bill and Kathy as missionaries. And in 94, at the convention with the Dakota Southern Baptist Fellowship, Deloris and I was presented with a 22-year-old plaque of service with the Dakota Fellowship, and that pretty much brings to a close. We left there, came to the ranch. We became members of Cascade Road Baptist Church and have been actively involved in it, and have served some as interim pastor, and give guys like Damian Phillips all kind of static.